Tame and Kim sat alone in the dark monitoring room. The walls around him were covered with screens showing signals from across the galaxy. His job was simple: listen for messages from space and report anything strange. For 3 years he had heard nothing but empty static. Tonight was different. The signal came in weak at first, like a whisper in the darkness. Taemin turned up the volume and leaned forward. The sound was beautiful, soft musical tones that seemed to carry deep sadness. He had never heard anything like it before. "So Young, get in here," he called to his partner in the next room. So Young Park rushed in, her translation equipment already in her hands. She was the best at understanding alien languages on the entire station. If anyone could figure out what this meant, it was her. "Play it again," she said, plugging in her devices. The message played once more. The musical tones rose and fell like a sad song. So Young's computers began working, trying to find patterns in the sounds. After an hour, words started to appear on her screen. "It's a distress call," So Young whispered. "They're asking for help." The message was coming from a planet called Kepler 442b, far from Earth. The beings sending it called themselves the Villani. So Young worked through the night, translating more and more of their language. What she learned made her heart heavy. The Villani were peaceful creatures who had never fought a war. They lived in harmony with their world and each other. They had traveled to this new planet to start a colony, hoping to live quiet lives among the stars, but something terrible had found them. The message spoke of ships filling their sky, dark vessels that brought only death. The attackers called themselves the Korthak Empire. They had come to take the Villani as slaves and steal their world. "We have done nothing wrong," the translated message read. "We only wanted to live in peace. We tried to talk to them, but they do not listen. They only want to hurt us." So Young's hands shook as she read more. The Villani had never met other space-traveling people before. They thought they were alone in the universe. Now in their final hours, they were sending this message hoping someone, somewhere, might hear them. "We do not ask for rescue," the message continued. "We know no one will come. We only want someone to know that we existed. We want someone to remember that we tried to be good." The message had more terrible news. The Korthak had already destroyed 17 other peaceful worlds. Entire civilizations had been wiped out or forced into slavery. The galaxy was full of suffering and no one had ever fought back. Taemin felt sick. How can this be happening? Why doesn't anyone stop them? So Young kept translating. The answer was simple and horrible. Every species the Korthak had met was peaceful. They had never learned to fight. When the Korthak came with their weapons and warships, the peaceful aliens could only surrender or die. The Villani message was getting weaker. Their colony was falling. In the background of their transmission, So Young could hear explosions and the sounds of buildings being destroyed. "Send word to Captain Lee," Taemin said. "He needs to hear this." Captain Juan Lee arrived at the monitoring station within an hour. He was a strong man with kind eyes who commanded the exploration ship Soul's Pride. He listened to the translated message in silence, his face growing darker with each word. "How far away are they?" he asked. 3 weeks travel time," So Young replied. "But Captain, by the time any help could reach them..." "They'll be dead or enslaved," Juan finished. "I know." The three of them sat in silence, listening to the fading Villani transmission. The musical tones were getting weaker. Soon there would be only silence. Then So Young's computer beeped. A new part of the message was coming through, something the Villani had hidden in their transmission. "It's a star map," she said, her voice filled with fear. "The Korthak's next targets." The map showed the Korthak Empire's expansion plans. They were moving through the galaxy in a clear pattern, taking every world with resources they wanted. The path they were following led directly toward Earth. "They're coming for us too," Taemin whispered. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they're coming." Juan stood up and walked to the window. Outside he could see Earth in the distance, beautiful, blue, and peaceful. His homeworld had no idea what was heading their way. "How long do we have?" he asked. So Young checked the map again. "If they keep moving at their current speed, maybe 5 years, maybe 10, and if we hide, if we stay quiet and hope they don't notice us." "Captain," So Young said softly, "the Villani tried hiding. All 17 destroyed civilizations tried hiding. The Korthak always find peaceful worlds. They hunt them down." The Villani transmission was almost gone now. In their final message, they shared something that broke all three humans' hearts. They had spent their last hours not fighting or running but creating art. They had painted pictures, written songs, and recorded stories. They wanted to leave something beautiful behind. If no one comes to help us, the last part of the message said, at least let our art survive. Let the universe know that we loved beauty and peace. Let them know that we were happy, even at the end. Then the transmission ended. The Villani were gone. Taman So-Young and Captain Juan sat in the dark room staring at the silent screens. Somewhere in the galaxy, another peaceful world had died. Somewhere out there, the Korthak Empire was getting stronger. What do we do? Taman asked. Captain Juan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm and determined. We go to Earth, we tell them what we learned, and then we make a choice. Do we hide and wait for the Korthak to find us, or do we do something no one in the galaxy has ever done before? What's that? So-Young asked. Juan looked at his two friends, and for the first time since hearing the Villani message, he smiled. We fight back. The three humans began preparing for the journey to Earth. They had no idea if anyone would listen to them. They had no idea if Earth's leaders would choose to help. But they knew one thing for certain. The Villani's cry for help would not be forgotten. In the darkness of space, the Korthak Empire continued its slow march toward Earth. But now, for the first time in centuries, someone was ready to stand in their way. The Earth Council meeting room was filled with angry voices. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Juan Lee brought the Villani message to Earth. Now, the most powerful people on the planet sat around a large table, arguing about what to do. We cannot risk our entire species for aliens we've never met, said Council Leader Roberts. His face was red with frustration. Humanity has only been traveling in space for 200 years. We're not ready for a war with a galactic empire. Admiral Jin Woo Choi stood up slowly. He was an old man with gray hair and scars from Earth's last war. Everyone in the room respected him, even when they disagreed with him. With respect, Council Leader, we're not ready for slavery either, Jin Woo said. The Korthak are coming whether we help the Villani or not. The only question is whether we face them as free people or as cowards. Yoon Ji-song, Earth's best military strategist, opened her computer files. She was young but brilliant, and her tactical mind was famous throughout the Earth Defense Fleet. I've studied every piece of information we have about the Korthak Empire, she said. They've conquered 18 peaceful civilizations in the last century. Every single one of those civilizations tried the same strategy. Hide and hope the Korthak would pass them by. And? Asked Council Leader Roberts. And every single one was found and destroyed, Yoonji replied. The Korthak don't just attack randomly. They hunt down peaceful species specifically. They want slaves who won't fight back. In the corner of the room, Dong-Hyun Nam listened quietly. He was the leader of Earth's experimental fighter squadron, the Storm Dragons. His pilots flew the newest and most dangerous ships humanity had ever built. If Earth decided to fight, he and his team would be the first to die. What are our chances if we do fight? Asked another council member. Yoonji pulled up a holographic display showing space battles. In terms of numbers, we lose badly. The Korthak have over 200 ships in their attack fleet. We have 30. The room fell silent. The numbers were terrible. But, Yoonji continued, numbers aren't everything. I've analyzed how the Korthak fight based on their previous conquests. They're used to easy victories against enemies who don't fight back. They've become lazy and overconfident. She changed the display to show human military history. Humans fight differently than any species the Korthak have met. We don't just fight to survive, we fight to win. And we're willing to take risks that other species would never consider. Admiral Jin Woo nodded. Every war in human history has been won by someone who was outnumbered. We specialize in impossible victories. Captain Juan Lee had been quiet during the entire meeting. Now he stood up and everyone turned to listen to him. I've been thinking about the Villani message, he said. In their final hours, they didn't ask us to avenge them. They didn't ask us to destroy the Korthak. They just asked us to remember that they existed. Juan walked to the window and looked out at Earth. But I think they were wrong about one thing. They said no one would come to help them. They thought they were alone in the universe. He turned back to the council. They weren't alone. We were here. We heard their call. And even though we were too late to save them, we're not too late to make sure this never happens again. Dong-Hyun Nam finally spoke up. My pilots and I have been talking. We know this is probably a suicide mission. We know we're outnumbered and outgunned. He paused and looked around the room. We want to go anyway. Why? Asked Council Leader Roberts. Because someone has to be first, Donghyun replied. Someone has to show the galaxy that the Korthak can be fought. Maybe we'll lose, but maybe we'll inspire others to try. Yoonji brought up another display, this one showing the galaxy's political situation. There are hundreds of species under Korthak rule. If just one of them sees us fight back successfully, they might find the courage to rebel. If 2 or 3 species rebel at the same time, the Korthak Empire could collapse. Admiral Jinwoo smiled grimly. So you're saying our best chance of winning is to make sure we're not fighting alone? Exactly, Yoonji said. The Korthak's greatest strength is that no one has ever seriously challenged them. Their greatest weakness is that they've never had to fight a real war. The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted to hide Earth's location and hoped the Korthak would never find them. Others wanted to surrender immediately and try to negotiate for better treatment as slaves. But slowly, one by one, the council members began to change their minds. They listened to the Villani's translated message again. They heard the sadness in those musical voices, the fear of a peaceful people facing destruction. We have something the Korthak have never encountered, said Council Member Chen. We have a choice. Every other species they've conquered was discovered by accident. They had no time to prepare, no time to decide how to respond. We know they're coming. What are you suggesting? Asked Council Leader Roberts. I'm suggesting we use that advantage, Chen replied. We go to them before they come to us. We choose the time and place of battle. We fight on our terms, not theirs. Mi Kyung-oh, Earth's chief engineer, had been working on calculations during the entire meeting. Now she stood up with exciting news. I think I know how we can even the odds, she said. Our new quantum tunnel drives don't just move ships faster than light. With some modifications, they could be turned into weapons. She explained her idea to the council. The quantum drives could create temporary black holes, or transport bombs directly inside enemy ships. They could make human fighters appear and disappear randomly, making it impossible for the Korthak to target them. It's dangerous, Mi Kyung admitted. We could accidentally destroy our own ships. But if it works, we could fight like ghosts in space. Admiral Jinwoo looked around the room. He could see that minds were changing. The impossible was starting to seem merely difficult. Let me ask you all a simple question, he said. What kind of species do we want to be? Do we want to be the kind that hides when others need help? Or do we want to be the kind that stands up to bullies even when the odds are impossible? Council Leader Roberts was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. If we do this, if we actually attack the Korthak Empire, there's no going back. They'll hunt us across the galaxy. This decision could doom our entire species. Yes, Admiral Jinwoo agreed. Or it could free the entire galaxy. The vote was close, 15 in favor of fighting, 13 in favor of hiding. But it was enough. Earth would go to war. As the council members filed out of the room, Captain Huan Lee stayed behind with Admiral Jinwoo. They stood together at the window, looking out at the peaceful blue planet that had just decided to challenge the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Are we doing the right thing? Huan asked. Jinwoo was quiet for a moment. I don't know if it's right, he finally said. But I know it's human, and sometimes that's enough. Outside the window, Earth continued its slow rotation. Soon, the planet's defenders would leave to face an enemy beyond imagination. The age of human isolation was ending. The age of galactic war was about to begin. The Korthak attack fleet hung in space like a dark cloud around the Villani colony world. 200 massive warships surrounded the planet. Their weapons pointed down at the remaining cities. War Chieftain Grazathok stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his enemies prepare to die. The last settlement will fall within the hour, reported his second-in-command. After that, we can begin harvesting the survivors for the slave markets. Grazathok nodded with satisfaction. The Villani had lasted longer than expected, 3 whole weeks of resistance. Most peaceful species surrendered within days, but the result was always the same. The Korthak Empire always won. On the planet below, Elder Thisara and the remaining Villani huddled in their underground shelters. Their beautiful crystal cities lay in ruins. Their songs of harmony had been replaced by the sounds of explosions and falling buildings. Do you think anyone heard our message? Asked a young Villani named Kesilan. Thisara touched the communication device with one of her delicate, 4-fingered hands. For 3 weeks, they had been sending their distress call into the darkness of space. For 3 weeks, they had received nothing but silence in return. I do not know, child, she said softly, but I hope that somewhere someone remembers that we existed. Above them, the Korthak prepared for their final assault. Grazthok had fought hundreds of these battles, and they were all the same. The peaceful aliens would make one last desperate stand, fail completely, and then surrender. It was almost boring. That's when the impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear apart as 30 human warships dropped out of quantum tunnel drive. The lead vessel, a massive battleship called Inchun's Hammer, appeared directly between the Korthak fleet and the planet. On the bridge of Soul's Pride, Captain Huan Li stared at the enemy fleet through his viewing screen. 200 ships against 30. The odds were even worse than they had expected. "All ships, this is Captain Li," he said into his communication device. "Remember why we're here. These people called for help and we answered. Today we show the galaxy what humans do when innocent people are threatened." Admiral Jinwoo Choi commanded the battle from the Inchun's Hammer. He had fought in Earth's wars, but he had never seen anything like the Korthak fleet. Their ships were huge, dark, and covered with weapons. They looked like they were built for one purpose: destroying hope. "Enemy fleet is moving to attack positions," reported his tactical officer. "They're surrounding us." "Good," Jinwoo replied. "That means we're exactly where we want to be." On the Korthak flagship, Grazthok stared at the human ships with confusion. These aliens had appeared from nowhere and positioned themselves between his fleet and his prize. It made no sense. "Who are these creatures?" he asked. "Unknown species, War Chieftain," replied his communications officer. "They're sending us a message. Put it through." Captain Huan Li's voice filled the Korthak bridge. He spoke slowly and clearly, making sure every word was understood. "Korthak fleet, this is Captain Huan Li of the Earth Defense Force. You will withdraw from this system immediately and release all Volani prisoners. This is your only warning." Grazthok laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "One warning? These pathetic creatures think 30 ships can challenge the might of the Korthak Empire?" He opened a channel to respond. "Unknown aliens, I am War Chieftain Grazthok. You have made a foolish mistake coming here. Surrender now and I will make your deaths quick." The response from the humans surprised him. "We didn't come here to surrender, Grazthok. We came here to teach you something you've apparently forgotten. Some fights are worth dying for." The battle began without any more words, but it didn't begin the way Grazthok expected. Instead of forming battle lines and trading shots like civilized warriors, the humans did something insane. They attacked. Dong Hyun Nam led his Storm Dragon fighters in the first assault. His small ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, using their quantum drives to phase in and out of normal space. They struck the Korthak fleet from impossible angles, firing their weapons and vanishing before return fire could reach them. "What is this madness?" Grazthok shouted as his ships tried to target enemies that kept disappearing. Mi-Kyung-Oh's modifications to the quantum drives worked perfectly. Human fighters materialized inside Korthak formations, fired at point-blank range, and teleported away before the explosions could damage them. But the real shock came when Soul's Pride charged directly at the Korthak flagship. "They're going to ram us," screamed a Korthak officer. Captain Huan Li's ship didn't ram the flagship. Instead, at the last second, it used its quantum drive to open a temporary wormhole. The wormhole swallowed a dozen Korthak missiles and spat them out behind their own fleet, where they struck Korthak ships instead of human ones. Admiral Jinwoo Choi coordinated the chaos from his command ship. His human fleet moved like nothing the Korthak had ever seen. Fast, unpredictable, and completely willing to take insane risks. "Target their command ship," he ordered. "If we can take out their leader, the rest might retreat." Yoon Ji-song's tactical planning proved correct. The Korthak had grown lazy from centuries of easy victories. They fought in predictable patterns, using overwhelming firepower against enemies who couldn't fight back. Against an enemy that fought like the humans, they were confused and disorganized. On the planet below, the Volani watched the battle through their instruments. They had never seen warfare before, but they could tell something amazing was happening. The humans were actually winning fights against the mighty Korthak ships. "They came," whispered Elder Thesura. "Someone actually came to help us." Young Kesselan pressed against the viewing screen. "Who are they? Why are they risking their lives for us?" Thesura didn't know the answer, but she felt something she had never experienced before. Hope. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships used tactics that no civilized species would attempt. They overloaded their engines to create artificial black holes that tore apart Korthak cruisers. They teleported bombs directly into enemy ships. They fought like the laws of physics were suggestions instead of rules. Slowly, Impossibly, the Korthak fleet began to retreat. Grazathok watched in disbelief as his mighty armada was torn apart by a tiny human force. 30 ships had destroyed nearly 50 of his vessels and damaged dozens more. It was impossible, but it was happening. War Chieftain, we must withdraw, urged his second in command. These aliens fight like demons. Our ships cannot match their tactics. For the first time in his long military career, Grazathok gave the order to retreat. But before his fleet jumped to hyperspace, he sent one final message to his homeworld. Korthak High Command, this is War Chieftain Grazathok. I am reporting a complete tactical failure at the Volani colony. We have encountered a new species. They call themselves humans. They fight without regard for their own safety, and they use weapons and tactics we have never seen before. He paused, looking at the human ships that had just defeated the finest fleet in the Korthak Empire. Send more ships. Send everything we have. These humans are not like the peaceful species we have conquered before. They are dangerous and they will not stop fighting. The galaxy has changed, High Command. There is a new force out there, and they fight like the stars themselves burn in their hearts. As the Korthak fleet disappeared into hyperspace, the human ships moved into orbit around the Volani world. Captain Huan Li opened a communication channel to the planet below. Volani people, this is Captain Huan Li of Earth. We heard your call for help. We're sorry we couldn't come sooner, but we're here now. You're safe. Elder Thisara's musical voice filled the human communication systems. Even through the translation devices, her joy and gratitude were clear. People of Earth, we do not have words in our language to express our thanks. You have done something we thought impossible. You have stood against the darkness and won. Captain Huan looked out at the damaged Volani cities and made a promise that would change the galaxy forever. This is just the beginning. No one should have to face the Korthak alone. From now on, when peaceful people call for help, Earth will answer. In the depths of space, War Chieftain Grazathok's message reached the Korthak homeworld. For the first time in centuries, the Empire faced a real threat. For the first time in galactic history, someone had fought back and won. The age of Korthak domination was ending. The age of human resistance had begun. News of the human victory at the Volani colony spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in over a century, someone had fought the Korthak Empire and won. In slave camps and hidden settlements throughout Korthak space, oppressed aliens whispered the story to each other. The humans had come. The humans had fought. The humans had won. Kyung-Soo Jang sat in a secret meeting room on the mining world of Torganeth. Around the table sat representatives from 3 different enslaved species, all of them trying to believe what they had heard. It is true, said Vexithara, a crystal being from the Gentari race. Her body sparkled with nervous energy as she spoke. My people on the outer colonies confirmed it. The Korthak war chieftain Grazathok retreated with his entire fleet. Mordoon diplomat Hugal bubbled with excitement. His aquatic species had been enslaved for 60 years, forced to work in underwater mines. If the humans can defeat a Korthak fleet, perhaps we can be free again. The third alien, a being of pure energy called Luxthara, flickered with hope. My people have hidden in the asteroid fields for 40 years. We thought we would never see our homeworld again. Kyung-Soo leaned forward. As Earth's new diplomatic representative to the enslaved worlds, his job was to build an alliance of resistance. But it was dangerous work. If the Korthak discovered these meetings, everyone in the room would be executed. The humans want to help, he said carefully, but we cannot fight the entire Korthak Empire alone. We need allies. We need you to fight alongside us. The 3 aliens looked at each other nervously. For generations, their species had been beaten down, their spirits broken. The idea of fighting back seemed impossible. Our people have forgotten how to be warriors, admitted Vexthera. The Korthak took our weapons and destroyed our military knowledge decades ago. Then we'll teach you, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Seung-Ho Yu enter the room. The human marine commander was tall and scarred, with the hard eyes of a professional soldier. He had been training rebel groups on 3 different worlds for the past month. I've seen your people in the slave camps, Seung-Ho said, his voice filled with anger. I've seen what the Korthak do to children who can't work fast enough. I've seen the punishment centers where they break spirits for entertainment. He sat down at the table, his hands clenched into fists. Any species that can survive that kind of treatment for generations has the strength to fight. You just need to remember how. On the medical ship Healing Hand, Young-Suk Bae worked around the clock treating injured aliens. She had learned to heal 17 different types of biology, from silicon-based Gentari to the energy patterns of the Lux Thigh. But the worst injuries weren't physical. They were the mental scars left by decades of slavery and abuse. "Doctor, this Valani child hasn't spoken since we rescued her," said her assistant, pointing to a young alien sitting alone in the corner. Young-Suk knelt down next to the child. Through her translator, she spoke gently. "What's your name, little one?" The child looked up with large, fearful eyes. "Are you going to hurt me?" "No, sweetheart. We're here to help. We're friends." The child's musical voice was barely a whisper. "The bad people said no one would ever come to save us. They said we were alone forever." Young-Suk felt tears in her eyes. "Well, the bad people were wrong. We came, didn't we? And we're never going to let them hurt you again." Across the galaxy, Hanul Kim worked in the shadows. Earth's best intelligence officer had spent 3 months infiltrating Korthak territory, gathering information about their empire. What she discovered changed everything. In a hidden base on the moon of Keftar, she met with a group of human commandos and shared her findings. "The Korthak aren't the original builders of their empire," she announced. "They conquered a species called the Architects 50 years ago and stole all their technology." The humans around the table looked shocked. Commander Yoon-Seok Park, leader of the commando team, leaned forward. "Are you saying the Korthak ships and weapons aren't even theirs?" "Exactly," Hanul replied. "The Architects built everything. The shipyards, the weapons factories, the communication networks. The Korthak just learned how to use them." She activated a holographic display showing the structure of the Korthak Empire. "But here's the important part. The Architects aren't extinct. They're still alive, hidden in secret colonies throughout Korthak space. They've been waiting 50 years for someone to help them take back what was stolen." This news was sent immediately to Admiral Jin Woo Choi, who was coordinating the growing rebellion from his flagship. The old admiral smiled when he read Hanul's report. "Contact the Architects," he ordered. "Tell them Earth wants to make a deal." 3 weeks later, Kyung-Soo Jang stood before the largest gathering of rebel representatives in galactic history. The meeting was held in an abandoned space station in neutral territory, far from Korthak patrols. 23 different species were represented. Some, like the Valani, were recent victims. Others, like the Gentari, had been enslaved for generations. All of them shared one thing. They wanted their freedom back. "The humans have given us something we had forgotten," Kyung-Soo said to the assembled delegates. "They've given us hope, but hope alone won't free our worlds. We need to act." An old Mordoon named Gulthek spoke up. "What do you propose?" "The Korthak have thousands of ships. Even with human help, we cannot match their numbers." Kyung-Soo activated a star map showing the entire Korthak Empire. "We don't need to match their numbers. We need to be smarter than them." He highlighted dozens of worlds throughout Korthak space. "The Empire controls 400 systems, but they can't have large fleets everywhere at once. Most of their forces are concentrated at key strategic points." "What are you suggesting?" asked a Lux Thigh representative. "Simultaneous rebellion," Kyung-Soo replied. "We hit 50 worlds at the same time. The Korthak can't respond to 50 separate uprisings all at once. While they're rushing to stop one rebellion, the others will have time to organize and arm themselves." The room fell silent as the aliens considered this plan. It was ambitious. It was dangerous. It was also their best chance for freedom. Bongjin Lee, Earth's weapons engineer, stood up to address the group. "Earth is prepared to supply weapons and training to every world that joins the rebellion. We've been adapting our technology to work with different alien biologies." He displayed images of modified human weapons, plasma rifles for the Gentari, sonic disruptors for the Mordoon, electromagnetic pulse weapons for the Lux Thigh. Every species will have the tools they need to fight. The vote was unanimous. 23 species agreed to coordinate the largest rebellion in galactic history, but the most important ally was still hidden in the shadows. In a secret meeting on the edge of Korthak space, Kyung-Soo Jang met with a being he had only heard about in whispers. The architect called himself Threndar, and he was one of the original builders of the technology the Korthak used to oppress the galaxy. "My people have waited 50 years for this moment," Threndar said. His voice was ancient and sad. "We built those ships to explore the stars in peace. Instead, they were turned into weapons of conquest. Can you help us? Kyung-soo asked. Threndar's form shifted, showing his species' natural ability to manipulate technology with their minds. We can do more than help. We built secret shutdown codes into every ship, every weapon, every communication system. When the rebellion begins, we can disable half the Korthak fleet from within. Kyung-soo felt his heart racing. Why didn't you do this before? Because we needed someone to coordinate the uprising, Threndar replied. We needed someone willing to fight even when the odds seemed impossible. We needed the humans. As the secret meeting ended, Kyung-soo looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 50 worlds were preparing for war. Enslaved species were training with human weapons. The architects were ready to reclaim their stolen technology. The Korthak Empire had ruled the galaxy through fear for over a century. They had convinced everyone that resistance was impossible, that their power could never be challenged. They were about to learn how wrong they were. On Earth, Admiral Jin-Woo Choi received the final report from his operatives throughout the galaxy. The rebellion was ready. 23 species, 50 worlds, and millions of enslaved beings were waiting for the signal to fight. He opened a communication channel to every human ship and base in the galaxy. All Earth forces. This is Admiral Jin-Woo Choi. In 72 hours, we will begin Operation Liberation. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every peaceful species in the galaxy. We're fighting to prove that tyranny cannot stand when good people choose to resist. He paused, thinking of the Villani message that had started it all. They thought no one would come when they called for help. Let's make sure no one ever has to think that again. The countdown to Galactic War had begun. The Korthak homeworld of Morgan Prime had never seen a fleet like the one approaching its borders. Ships from 23 different species flew together in the largest armada in galactic history. At the center of the formation, Admiral Jin-Woo Choi's flagship Inchin's Hammer led the way toward the heart of the Empire. In the command center of Morgan Prime, Emperor Vashtok stared at the tactical displays with growing horror. Red warning lights flashed across 50 different star systems. Rebellion had erupted simultaneously across his entire empire. How is this possible? He demanded. How did so many systems rebel at exactly the same time? General Thekmor, his military commander, looked defeated. It was coordinated, Emperor. Someone has been organizing our slaves for months. And worse, our own ships are turning against us. On the display screens, Korthak vessels throughout the Empire suddenly stopped responding to commands. Their weapons powered down, their engines went dead, and their communication systems failed. The architect shutdown codes were working perfectly. 50% of our fleet is disabled, reported a terrified technician. The rebels have some kind of virus that affects our technology. What the Korthak didn't know was that the virus was actually Threndar and his fellow architects, using their mental connection to the technology they had built 50 years ago. Hidden in secret bases throughout the Empire, the architects were reclaiming their stolen creations. Emperor Vashtok activated his personal communication system and sent a message to every Korthak world. All loyal forces fall back to Morgan Prime. We make our final stand here. But loyalty was becoming rare in the crumbling empire. On the planet Zethkalar, Korthak General In-Young Kwan watched her soldiers lay down their weapons rather than fire on fleeing slaves. In-Young had served the empire for 30 years, but she had grown tired of the cruelty and pointless violence. When Captain Huan Lee's liberation fleet arrived at Zethkalar, In-Young made a choice that shocked everyone, including herself. She opened a communication channel to the human ship. Human vessel, this is General In-Young Kwan of the Korthak Defense Force. I wish to discuss terms of surrender. Captain Huan almost couldn't believe what he was hearing. General, are you surrendering your forces? No, Captain. I am surrendering the entire planet. My people are tired of being soldiers for a corrupt empire. We want to join your rebellion. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Korthak soldiers who had grown sick of their empire's brutality defected to the rebel cause. The rebellion wasn't just freeing slaves, it was offering redemption to their former oppressors. The final battle took place in the skies above Morgan Prime. The rebel fleet faced the last loyal forces of the Korthak Empire in a fight that would determine the future of the galaxy. Dong-hyun, Nam led his Storm Dragon fighters against the Korthak's elite guard squadrons. But this time he wasn't alone. Villani pilots flew alongside him, their ships moving in perfect harmony thanks to their telepathic abilities. Chitauri crystal fighters reflected and amplified human weapons. More dune vessels attacked from underwater positions on the planet's oceans. "All rebel forces, this is Admiral Jin Woo Choi," came the voice over the communication systems. "Today we fight not for conquest but for liberation. Today we show the galaxy what happens when good people choose to stand together." The battle was fierce but brief. The Korthak forces, reduced to half strength by the Architect's sabotage and demoralized by the rebellion's success, fought without hope. Many simply surrendered rather than die for an empire they no longer believed in. Emperor Vashitok made one final attempt to maintain his power. He activated the planet's orbital defense stations and targeted the civilian evacuation ships that were rescuing slaves and refugees. "If I cannot rule the galaxy, then I will destroy it," he broadcast to all ships. "All beings will serve the Korthak or die." That's when Wu Jinseo, an architect-engineer who had been hiding on Morgan Prime for decades, made his move. Using his mental connection to the planet's technology, he turned the defense stations against the Emperor's own palace. "Emperor Vashitok," Wu Jin's voice echoed through the planet's communication systems, "you have used our creations to bring suffering to the galaxy for 50 years. No more." The orbital weapons that had been aimed at innocent civilians instead fired on the symbols of Korthak power. The Emperor's palace, the slave processing centers, and the military command buildings were destroyed in minutes. Emperor Vashtok died in the ruins of his throne room, buried under the weight of his own ambitions. With their leader dead and their forces scattered, the remaining Korthak military commanders surrendered. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for over a century collapsed in a single day, but the victory came with a price. Many rebels had died in the fighting. Entire worlds bore the scars of the Liberation War. Young Suk Bae and her medical teams worked around the clock treating the wounded from dozens of different species. In the children's ward of her hospital ship, she found a small Vallani girl who had been injured in the final battle. It was the same child she had met months earlier, the one who had been afraid that no one would come to help. "Doctor," the child said in her musical voice, "the bad people are gone now, aren't they?" Young Suk smiled and gently touched the child's hand. "Yes, sweetheart. The bad people are gone. And do you know what the best part is?" "What?" "You never have to be afraid that no one will come to help again. Because now the whole galaxy knows. When someone calls for help, we answer." 1 year later, representatives from over 100 species gathered on the rebuilt Vallani homeworld for the first Galactic Council meeting. The beautiful crystal cities had been restored, and the Vallani songs of harmony once again filled the air. Taiman Kim, now Earth's first galactic ambassador, stood before the assembly. He thought back to that night in the monitoring station, when he had first heard the Vallani's desperate message. So much had changed since then. Elder Thisera, now the elected president of the Galactic Council, addressed the gathering. Her translated words carried the hope of 1,000,000 worlds. 1 year ago, my people cried out in desperation. We believed we were alone in the universe. We believed no one would come to help us in our darkest hour. She looked directly at the human delegation. We were wrong. Earth's strongest force, not their weapons, not their ships, but their refusal to let others suffer alone, changed everything. The hall filled with the sounds of approval from dozens of different species. Some clapped, some sang, some glowed with bioluminescence, and some created harmonic frequencies. It was a symphony of gratitude that could be heard across the galaxy. Today we do not gather as conquerors and conquered, Thisara continued. We gather as equals sharing the same stars. We gather as friends who have learned that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. The Council's first act was to establish the Galactic Defense Charter. Any world under attack could call for help, and the combined fleets of the free worlds would respond. Never again would peaceful people face extinction alone. Captain Huan Li, now promoted to Admiral, commanded the new Galactic Defense Fleet. His flagship was no longer called Soul's Pride. It had been renamed Hope's Answer, in honor of the Vallani message that had started everything. As the ceremony concluded, a special memorial was unveiled in the center of the Vallani capital city. It was a crystal monument containing the names of every being who had died before the galaxy learned to stand together. At the base of the memorial, a simple inscription was carved in the languages of all free worlds. They thought no one would come, They were wrong. But perhaps the most important moment came when a small figure stepped forward to place a flower at the memorial. It was Sangmin Park, the first child born to parents from two different worlds, a human father and a Vellani mother. The child represented something that had never existed before, a truly galactic civilization. As Sangmin placed the flower, he spoke in both human English and Vellani musical tones. "We remember you. We promise that no one will ever be alone again." In the crowd watching the ceremony, former Korthak General In Young Kwan stood next to architect-engineer Threndar. Both had found redemption in the new galaxy, working to repair the damage their peoples had caused. "Do you think it will last?" In Young asked. "This peace we've built?" Threndar's ancient eyes sparkled with hope. "Look around you. A year ago, these species were strangers or enemies. Now they're family. That kind of bond doesn't break easily." High above the planet, the ships of the Galactic Defense Fleet patrolled the space lanes. Their mission was simple but vital. Ensure that when someone calls for help, someone always answers. The age of galactic tyranny was over. The age of unity had begun, and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the message continued to broadcast. Not the old Vellani cry for help, but a new message, one of hope and friendship that welcomed any species to join the growing family of free worlds. The galaxy had learned its most important lesson. No one has to face the darkness alone. They thought no one would come. They were wrong, and they would never be wrong again.